Happy New Year to those of you that I haven't seen, which I think is most of you. We went around last week, but Happy New Year. It's good to see you all. I think I can still say that in mid-January. Okay, so I've been invited to talk about identity and what does that mean. And I found this quite a hard subject to think about and to talk about because it's not something that I necessarily think about a lot myself. Some people do, but I don't really think about my personality or who I am very much. I just am. But I do know that in society right now, how we define ourselves and how we identify is quite a big deal. You don't have to look far in the news to see the kind of phrase of "I identify myself as," and it's a fairly common thing within society at the moment. So I want to ask you the question: how do you, or what do you identify as? So if I ask you the question, who are you? What do you identify as? A woman? A child of God? Amazing? Cold? A father? Husband? Mother? Cool. Anything else? Friend? I'm sorry? A daughter? Yep, absolutely. And I think that's right. I think that's generally how we describe ourselves, how we identify ourselves is often around things like family status. So we said a daughter, a son, a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, those kind of things. We may identify ourselves by our profession. Nobody said profession, but might say I am a mechanic or a train driver or a nurse and I'm not any of those. But you might say that's you might identify your profession and say I am that. You might be down to your race. Racial identity is quite a big thing at the moment, so it could be down to race, it could be down to skin color and ethnicity and so on. I hold a British passport, but I also hold an Irish passport. I tend to identify, particularly when it comes to rugby, with Ireland. Um, and you know, uh, there's the part of that is this thing, and I'll come on to it in a little more detail. But part of that is because our identity, who we identify with, who we join ourselves with, it's where we can be accepted. But also, and part of the reason I like to identify as Irish is because I like to stand out. We like to be unique. But we can identify by race, we can identify by gender, we can identify, so one of the comments was as a woman. We identify by religion, a child of God. We would identify as Christians generally. But we can also identify by things like our socio-economic standing. So, I consider myself to be part of the Western culture, Western world, and thereby, in the context of the world, relatively well off. But I might also identify with political by my political views. I might say that I'm a liberal, or I might say I stand for a socialist, or I might say I stand for fascism, or whatever. And again, I'm not saying I stand for any of those necessarily, but people do identify and join themselves to particular political groups, and will identify themselves as a political, in a political terms. We could identify ourselves by our education. We could say, look, I am an educated person with a degree, or I am a uneducated person, who didn't achieve anything in school. We could identify ourselves by our education. We could identify ourselves by our language. It could be that I'm an English speaker. You may disagree, but I am. It could be that I identify as somebody who can also speak Russian. I don't. But it might be that others might be able to do that, or Spanish, or French, or whatever it may happen to be. So we could identify by that. We could identify, there's a lot in the news, and there's a lot of thing about identifying by our sexual orientation as well. So, as I mentioned, why do people define themselves in these ways? Why is identity such a big deal? How do I identify myself and define myself? Why is that such a big deal? Well, I want to suggest that, and I've kind of alluded to this already, that it's for two reasons primarily, for two primary reasons. There might be more, but there's two reasons that I think are the reason why we tend to identify ourselves with particular groups or identify ourselves in particular ways. And it's, as I mentioned, it's number one, to fit in. So if I said that I identify as a Tottenham fan, there are certain people who I will endear myself to. Whether I want to be associated with them or not is another matter. If I were to say I identify as a Man United fan, I can assure you I'll get a very different reaction. There'll be other people who I may well identify with and who may well be accepted by and would be considered to belong as part of that group, and others that wouldn't. But generally, there's the whole thing around, if I identify myself with, for example, a political group or a political leaning, then I tend to be accepted within those circles. We have similar values, similar ideologies, and therefore I'm going to find people of like-minded and fit in and be accepted. So we generally, I think people identify in particular ways because they want to fit in. But equally, people want to stand out. We are all unique, and people want to be recognized as being unique. There is more value in a unique piece of art than there is in a duplication or mass production piece of art or piece of item. And so we want to be recognized as being valuable because of our uniqueness. We want to say, actually, I have some value. I am not the same as everybody else. As I was looking, I looked at kind of twins and the way that twins identify and so on. And a lot of twins, yes, they recognize the similarities, but they also want to be unique. They want to be recognized as unique themselves, not necessarily part of a twin group or the other person. So, is how we identify and those kind of things that we've just talked about, are those truly representations of our true selves? Is the way that we define ourselves really our authentic identity? Well, I mentioned things like race and gender and things like that, and that's encapsulated in our bodies. So, are our bodies, are our physical beings, actually what makes us us? Is this body what makes me me? I want to ask you a question. You know me like this, but what would happen if I had alopecia and I lost all my hair? Would I still be me? Even though I've lost a part of my physical being, would I still be me? What about if I had an accident and I had to have a leg amputated? So I've lost a fairly significant part of my body. Am I still me? What if I went right to the extreme and became a bit like, I don't know if you're familiar with Christy Brown. Anybody know Christy Brown, the Irish artist? There was the film My Left Foot. Suffered with cerebral palsy from birth and effectively lost the use of his body. Did that change who he was? There's a French author, and I can't remember his name, unfortunately. He wrote The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Let me see, I did have it here. 1 second. Jean-Dominique Bowey is the name of the guy. Jean-Dominique Bowey, at the age of 43, I think it was, he had a stroke, and he ended up having what was called lock-in syndrome. He basically lost the use of all of his body except for his eye. So the only way he could communicate was by blinking. Did that stop him being him? If that were to happen to me, if I was paralyzed in my whole body so that my body just, nothing worked, would that stop me being me? Well, he actually wrote that book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, from his bed by winking. He was able to continue being him, I'd suggest, even though his body had shut down. So it begs the question then, are our bodies actually what defines us, what makes us us? And I suggest probably not. In fact, over the course of our lifetimes, generally the cells in our bodies are reproduced about 7 times. So the cells in my body right now are not the same cells that I had when I was born. You know, our skin generally reproduces about once a month. Our whole skin changes effectively about once a month. Our bones about 10 years. So it takes it different for different parts of the body. But effectively, the bodies that we live in now are likely to be different to the bodies that we were born with. So I would suggest that our body isn't actually what defines me or what defines you. So what about perhaps then it's our abilities, it's our skills, it's our technical capabilities. You know, I like playing badminton, but if I lost the ability to play badminton, would that stop me being me? No, I don't think it would. At school, I learnt French. I was quite good at French. I'm not so good at French now. I've lost some of that technical capability. Does that stop me being me? No. So therefore, do the skills and abilities and our technical abilities define us? If we lose those skills and abilities, do they change the essence of who we are? Do they make us somebody different? No, they're not the definition of us. Likewise, academic skills and education. When I was at university, I studied some fairly complex mathematics. I looked at integration over surfaces and multidimensional matrices, imaginary numbers, Fourier transformation, Laplace transformation. Does that mean anything to you guys? Yeah. I know Levi knows some of it, but I can tell you I went with, you know, infinite matrices, dimensions, and processing beyond where Levi went with that stuff. But that's another matter. However, but he's gone further in other things, so that's fine too. The thing is, though, that actually, if you were to give Levi and I a Fourier transformation to work out, I can guarantee that he would be able to do it much better than I could, because I couldn't do it at all. I've forgotten many of those things. So does that fact that I've forgotten certain, you know, intellectual skills that I once had and education that I once had, does that change who I am? Does that change me? Does that mean I am no longer me? No. So I would suggest then that our education and our intellect don't define who we are. So, okay, if it's not our bodies, it's not our skills, it's not our intellect, surely it's our memories, right? Surely it's the things that we remember, the experiences that we have and we remember, those are what make us who we are. I haven't got the greatest of memories. I don't remember my 6th birthday. Does anybody here remember their 6th birthday? No? You do? Cool. Excellent. But I don't. To be honest with you, I don't remember my 26th, 36th, or even my 46th birthday. In fact, to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you what happened on the 6th of this month. But does that fact that I don't remember those things, does that change me? Does that stop me being me? No. So, what is it then that defines me, that defines the essence of me? If it's not my body, if it's not my physical nature, if it's not my intellect, if it's not my technical capabilities, my abilities, if it's not my memories, what is it that defines me? I would suggest to you that what defines us is what we would call our soul or our spirit. Now, scientists and others would say that it's something else. They refer to it often as a character. So it's the things about what are the things that we love and we hate. It's our temperaments. It's our inclinations towards certain things or towards other things. It's critically, it's our values. It's what do we value? What do we think is important? What are priorities to us? These are what make us us. It's our character, it's our spirit, it's our soul that makes us us. That's truly our identity, I would suggest. Now, how does that happen? I think it's amazing. You know, if you look at two embryos, but I'm talking before they even become embryos. When you've got the sperm and the egg, if you look at the sperm and the egg and you look at them through a microscope, I suspect that it'd be very difficult to tell two people apart just by looking at their initial cell and their sperm. And in fact, as I mentioned, if you look at twins, they have the same egg and sperm that come together in identical twins, and obviously not every twin, but in identical twins, it's the same sperm and egg that causes them. So they are exactly the same at the beginning of their creation, as we all were. And I think it'd be very difficult to tell us apart. I think it's amazing that as we develop in the womb, we become completely unique individuals. Completely different. I think that's absolutely incredible. But that's what happens, and we develop our physical definitions of ourselves. You know, they become, the physical differences become more obvious over time. Our gender, our skin tone, our bone structure, our facial features, etc. They all change over time. And in fact, even for identical twins who are born from the same cells, from the same egg and sperm, they actually have differences. They have unique fingerprints. They might be similar, but there are some slight differences in those fingerprints. So the fact is that even though we might look at, at the end of the gestation period when babies are born, and we might look at them and some may say, oh, all babies look the same, the reality is that they're not. Everybody is unique. Everybody is an individual. And it's through our childhood that we start to gather experiences. It's through our childhood that we start to actually develop our sense of individuality. We begin to understand that I am me. And through the experiences that we have with families, friends, our community, teachers, schooling, etc., we start to develop a sense of those values, those characteristics that are the essence of who we are. We learn about what behaviours are seen as acceptable in our culture and what behaviours are seen as unacceptable. We learn about where do we get approval from, how are we validated, what validated us, what gave us worth. We learn about where do we fit in, who are the groups of people that we fit with, and a bit about our social standing. And as we move into our teenage years, then things develop a little bit further. We start to perhaps challenge some of those values a little bit more and actually try and push some of those boundaries to figure out, actually, do I really believe this? Is this really a value for me? Or is this something that actually, I'm not so sure about? We start to discover our independence. We've been kind of often as children brought up under our parents' kind of guidance, and they have instilled their values and their thinking and their way of thoughts, their political ideologies, whatever it may be, on us. But as we become into teenagers, we start to challenge some of those. We start to think about it and think about what's really important to us. Is it, what do I value as an individual? What do I think is the most important thing? We start to develop relationships. We start to kind of come into situations where we can actually join with people who are like-minded, even like-valued, and we start to figure out who are the people I want to be associated with and who are those that I don't want to be associated with. There becomes much more of that social finding out where we fit socially and developing those kind of relationships and learning how to build relationships. How do we relate to people that perhaps don't share the same values as us? When we were at school, we probably just wouldn't even talk to certain people. But as we move into our teenage years, as we develop into adulthood, we have to learn how do we get on with others who aren't necessarily like us. So we start to develop, again, more of that sense of identity, what makes us us. Well, those characteristics continue to develop in our teenage years, and that's quite a key time when those aspects and those values are being developed. And then when we come into adulthood, generally we have a fairly well developed sense of identity. We may not recognize it, we may not call it that, but we have a fairly good idea of what are the things that we consider to be important, what are the priorities in our lives, and what aren't. We recognize that we are now responsible for our own behaviors, so therefore we have to take our behavior and the way we act responsible, and we're responsible for the way that we treat others. So in adulthood, we have to take on those kind of responsibilities, which all adds to our character. Now, just because those characteristics are defined during our formative years doesn't mean they can't necessarily be changed, because they can. It is possible that over time, for us to come to a realization that actually I held this particular thing as important, as valuable, as necessary, and to realize, actually, do you know what? That's less important than I thought it was. So, in looking to try and find out who we are, we could say, okay, all right, I want to find out who I truly am. Who is my authentic self? You know, is a phrase you may hear. Who am I really? I know what I'll do. I'll take some time out. I'll escape society and all its pressures and all its influences, and I'll go and find myself. And I'll find out who I truly am. And there was a journalist called Nigel Ansell who did this. And he decided to go and live in the wilds of Wales for 5 years, effectively as a hermit, and he went to find his true self. He lived in a house. He said that if he walked for 20 miles in one direction, he would not come across another house, another dwelling. In fact, he said he wouldn't come across another road or another fence even. He was really in an isolated spot. He didn't have any running water. He didn't have any gas or electricity. He kind of, he was completely isolated from society and the influences of the world around him. So what did he find through this experience of solitude for 5 years? Did he find himself? Did he learn more about his true self? What he said was that actually, through solitude, it didn't lead to introspection and soul searching. Rather, he learnt to forget himself. Alone, there was no need for identity or self-definition. And he came to recognize that the sense of self, the sense of who we truly are, comes from our interactions with others. What develops our identity is our engagement with others and our interactions with others, because that is where the things that we hold important, the values, the things that we think are critical to life and to and so on, that's where they come out. That's where they get expressed. And actually, it's true. If you think about the way that we view ourselves in a context, determines how we behave and are perceived in that context. So as a parent, the way that you view yourself and the way that you consider your role as a mother or father will determine how you play out that role and how you bring up your children. So the way that you view yourself in that context will cause that to be the case. In an organization, in a business, in a job, the way that you view yourself will cause you to respond and behave in a particular way. You know, I had an interesting situation recently, personally, where I came to realize kind of who I was in my job. Now that may seem silly, but we work in we work in a matrix organization. I don't know if that means anything to you. It's got nothing to do with n-dimensional matrices. It's to do with the fact that I might have a manager, but my work might be assigned and managed by somebody else. So actually, when I'm working with teams, I work with fairly big teams and quite a lot of teams. They are their line manager. The person that they report into isn't me. I'm not their manager per se, but I do direct the work that they do. I do define the way that they work. So that's my role. But what was interesting was that we had some communication to be done. We wanted to share something with the team. And I said to one of the line managers, I said, do you want to share it with your team? And they said, no, it's going to come better from you because you've got more weight in what you're saying, which I was surprised at and kind of took me aback, but it made me realize a little bit more about who I am in my work and how I'm identified in my work, and therefore that affects how I act in my working environment. And it's the same here within church. How do you consider yourself within this church family? That will impact how you engage with the rest of the body and how you get involved with the work that the church is doing. So it is through our interactions, it's through our engagements with others, is how we express ourselves and our identity, and that's how our identity becomes evident. The sad thing is that many people live in social isolation. They live in loneliness. There was a study done, well, it's still ongoing actually. It was the Harvard Study of Adult Development. And it started in 1938, and they're looking at adult development. And they took a group of about 1,000 or so adults, and over the time that number has grown as those people have got spouses and families, and those people have been involved and added to the study. And they've been looking at, what makes people happy, what is adult development, what brings out, healthy lifestyles and so on. And they asked people, as part of a similar study, asked a number of students in 2018, what will make you happy? What do you think will give you a fulfilling life? What will make you happy? And unsurprisingly, 83% of those students said to be rich. Having money will make me happy. Being well off financially. 55% said being successful will make me happy. Being an authority in a particular field and being recognized as an authority I'd be successful, and that would make me happy. This study that looked at people over the course of their life, was able to interview some people in their 80s. More recently, as they started in 1938, more recently interview people in their 80s and say to them, "What are you most proud of? And what are your biggest regrets?" And the outcomes of those questions were not the accolades and the awards that people had won. Those were not the things that made them most proud. There was actually a Nobel Prize winner in amongst this study group, and they didn't mention their Nobel Prize as being what they were most proud of. What these people towards the end of their lives identified as being most proud of was their relationships. I was a good father. I was a good boss. I was a good mentor. I was a good coach. How they had supported and helped others, how they had interacted with others, was what defined their most important and their proudest moments. Their biggest regrets often were the fact that they hadn't invested time into the people that they loved. That they'd spent, there's the saying of, nobody on the deathbed says, "I wish I had spent more time in the office." And that's exactly what these people said. That was their biggest regrets, that they spent too much time in the office at work, not involved with the people that they love. Because, as I mentioned, it's through the relationships, it's through the interactions, that's where we truly express who we are. And more studies looking at loneliness have found that they say that loneliness is actually detrimental to the health. They said it's equivalent to smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day. True loneliness. Because people want to belong. As I said up front, the whole reason we identify in particular ways is because we want to belong, we want to fit in, we want to be accepted, and because there's a joy, there's a pleasure in being included. But equally, being part of a group of people that we can identify with, who have similar values, who have similar outlooks on life, is that those people often have similar goals, similar dreams, similar visions, and so we can work together for a common purpose. But those visions, those dreams, those desires come from our character, our identity, who we are. I heard someone say that if you don't know what your identity is, if you don't know what your character is, look at the groups that you're part of. because the things that those groups hold dear, the way that those groups interact, the way that those groups behave, the things that those groups are trying to achieve will be the things that you want, the things about you often. So I said up front that identity is a big deal in society. People are wanting to identify as this or as that. And it feels like we're in a bit of an identity crisis. And if I'm honest with you, I think that potentially it's only going to get worse. I think that, with the development of AI, there's going to be this question of what's human and what's not human. I suspect that people will start integrating technology into their bodies, and we will go towards a cyborg type of environment. I mean, I'm predicting, I have absolutely no idea, but this is what I anticipate. So then it becomes a real question of how do I identify? Do I identify as a human, even? Or do I identify as some other being? It's an interesting thing. One of the reasons that I think that we have some of this identity crisis is because we don't necessarily have a true sense of what we're worth. We're not clear in ourselves. We don't have a clarity in ourselves as to actually this is what I'm worth. This is what I am. This is my value, and we don't necessarily have a clarity as to what are my values. What are the things that I actually believe in and hold dear to? And if we don't know those things, then we really struggle to deal with life, everyday life. Because in everyday life, we're going to face criticism. We're going to face people who come against us and come against our beliefs and come against our ideals. And if we don't have the strength in ourselves to know who we are, then we're just going to fold. We're just going to fold. We're just going to end up, not being able to stand up for what we believe in and end up just kind of believing whatever other people say about us and accepting it, no matter how good, how extreme, how bad, how hurtful, how painful it may be. We end up just going, yeah, I suppose that is just me. Because we don't have that sense of our worth ourselves. We live in a society that is always looking to others for affirmation. Now, we went to Singapore for over the Christmas period, as I'm sure many of you know, and it was really interesting to see the different culture and to observe the differences. Now, from a geographical perspective, if one were to look at Singapore, the landscape, you could be forgiven for thinking it's a city in America or Europe or somewhere like that. But it was interesting seeing the culture of the people who lived there. And one of the things that absolutely drove me mad about the culture was selfies. It was absolutely unbelievable. Because rather than just being able to go to these tourist attractions or these these places where you could get great views out across the city or out across the bay or whatever it may happen to be, rather than just taking a picture of the beauty or the amazingness of what was there, they had to be in the picture themselves. Now, it wasn't just that they had to be in the picture. It wasn't just a case of, 1, 2, 3, smile, and there you go, there's a picture. No. It was a whole palaver. It was a whole rigmarole. They had to have the pose. That was the pose. You had to have the pose. They spent ages, just have to pose correctly. Just need to look my best. And it was infuriating because you'd want to be getting past, you want to get somewhere. And you'd kind of want to be respectful of the fact that they're taking a photo of themselves or of a friend, so you wouldn't necessarily want to walk through it. But towards the end of the few days, only a few days, I was like, I don't care. I really, honestly, you can have a picture of me. No, I'm walking through. I just don't care. But it was amazing. It was incredible. But it was this thing of, it wasn't just, as I say, it wasn't just enough for them to have a smile for themselves in the picture. They had to give the pose, and it was incredible. We were at the airport on our leaving, and the airport is pretty amazing, so I'm not going to deny that. And they've got a kind of a garden space in the airport. But there was a young girl and her friend was taking pictures of her sitting in this garden in the airport. And again, it was all about the pose. It was all about, they had to look just right. But then just round the corner from them, there was an older lady doing exactly the same thing. And and then you had the children in their prams. They'd be having a picture of the child, a toddler, in the pram, and the child would be doing the same thing. And it's like, come on. Also in the airport, a little later on, there's two guys, well, there's three guys. One was taking a photo of the other two guys, taking a picture of the departure lounge, of the gates where you check your luggage in. It's like, what? I'm sorry? You want a picture of yourself by a check-in gate. What is going on? Now, some places were very beautiful, and so you could sort of say, okay, I can understand why you'd want a picture of yourself by that. But we went to the top of the Marina Bay Sands, which is a landmark place there where you can see out and see great sights across the city. And there was a lady there having her picture taken by a friend, and she was posing next to a dustbin. And it's like, what are you doing? But she got really irritated with Jude when he went to put something in the dustbin because it was spoiling her pose, it was spoiling her whatever. And it's this whole thing of people just want to give an impression, give a something so that they are liked. Because these pictures, I'm assuming, will end up on Instagram. I forgot there's one other one as well I'll tell you about, which infuriated me. But anyway, there we go. We were at this place called Gardens by the Bay, and it's a bit like, if anybody's been to the Eden Project in Cornwall, they've got these kind of domes, and in the domes they've got different climates and all the rest of it. And it's pretty impressive. They've got this great big indoor waterfall, and it's all fairly amazing. It's great. There was a lady there who was going round by herself. And she, so as well as I mentioned the kind of this thing with people taking pictures of each other, but then the selfies and the selfie sticks. Anyway, this lady had a selfie stick that converted into a tripod. So she could put the selfie stick on the floor, get the tripod, look up and get the picture of the waterfall or whatever, and then she'd do her. And it was the same pose everywhere. Oh, I'm telling you, it was driving me mad. But anyway, my assumption is that these fake and cheesy pictures weren't for the people's own benefits. It was so that they would be liked, approved of by the people that get to see them, whether it be on Instagram, whether it be friends and family, whatever. They weren't enjoying the moments necessarily. They were more bothered about what others would think of their experiences. Sorry, I went off on a tried there. But anyway, the problem is when you do that, when you do things for social media, and if that's what you're, looking for likes, then you're opening yourself up for criticism. You're opening yourself up to receive the hate or the influence of others. And if that's all you can see, if that's where your sense of worth and value comes from, then it's a very dangerous place to be, because you're just going to be swayed by public opinion, by the latest fad, by the latest trend, constantly trying to keep up with searching for approval of others. And if we don't have clarity and strength in our values, when we're being swayed by these things, we will end up compromising our values in order to be liked by others. We don't want to be rejected or made fun of, so we will, rather than standing up for the things that we think are important, will bow to society. The good news is that we don't have to be like that, because God didn't create us as timid, as unable. I've lost the verse. You all know it. It's in 1 Timothy. 2 Timothy, I beg your pardon. So I shall find it on here, one moment. 2 Timothy 1 and verse 7. I'm going to read it from the NASB, from the New American Standard Bible. For God has not given us a spirit of timidity, but of power, love, and discipline. So God hasn't given us a spirit of timidity, of cowardice is another word that's used there, such that we need to bow and be swayed by the views of others. God has given us a spirit of power, of strength. So we can stand strong in our beliefs, in what we believe in. So how do we build a true sense of worth? How do we get that, rather than being swayed by the views of others, rather than saying we identify with this group or that group because that's what we feel is the in trend, that's what we feel will be accepted, how do we build our true strength, our true recognition of who we are? Well, in children, it comes from, for children, often they learn their value because they see how their parents respond to them. If their parents validate their emotions in a particular situation, then they kind of sense, oh, this is okay to feel this way. It's all right for me to have that. And they get a sense of, who they are in that moment. If they, if they fail or if they fall down and their parents are there for them to help them pick them up, they understand that it's okay to fail and they can get picked up again. They understand, they start to get a sense of what's important and what's, who they truly are. And actually the fact is that their failures don't define them. So it's through these things that we can learn who we are. It's through receiving acceptance irrespective of unconditional love. It's not dependent on what I do or the way I behave. And so I want to challenge us as individuals here right now that yes, that comes to, children often receive that from parents, not always, but often receive that kind of experience through parents. But it doesn't have to be just within childhood. Many people don't necessarily receive that unconditional love. Many people don't necessarily get that affirmation of who they are through their parents necessarily. And as they grow older, they may not recognize who they are. As I've said, there's many people who are swayed by public opinion, who are swayed by they wanting to be in vogue, they want to be liked and accepted at the cost of the cost of themselves to some extent, at the cost of their values. But we can show those people a different way. We can show those people love, unconditional love, because we have received unconditional love. God has said to us, I love you unconditionally. I love you so much. You're so precious to me that I will send my only son to die. I sent my only son to die for you. Because you, as an individual, each and every one of us, is valued and important to God. I love the parable of the shepherd who, one of the sheep goes off, and then he goes off and he leaves the 99. He says that one is so precious to me that I'm prepared to leave the 99. I'm not prepared to say, actually I've got 99 sheep. That one doesn't matter. That one matters so much that I will go off and I will effectively leave the 99 at risk because that one is so precious, and that one is you. You are so precious to God that He loves you so immensely, and it's not conditional on what you've done or what you haven't done. He accepts you. He says, I welcome you into my family. I welcome you as a son and daughter into my family because you are wonderful. And it's not dependent on who we are or what we do. And God says He will always be there for us. He will invest the time in us. He will take the time to care about every aspect of our lives and to be there for us. He will never leave us or forsake us, is what He said to His people in Israel when they were about to go into the promised land. He would never leave them or forsake them. Jesus came. He was called Emmanuel, God with us. He is constantly with us. I've just found the verse here that I lost earlier on. Never mind. Yeah, we don't need to be swayed by the opinions of others. Our identity is not based on what others think of us. Yes, we want to stand out and be unique and be valued. Well, God says you are valued. You are worth so much to Him. You are unique. He created you uniquely. He knows the number of hairs on your head. And I can suspect, I was going to say guarantee, I can't guarantee, but I suspect that the number of hairs on each of our heads is a different number. But God knows us individually because He values us as individuals. But He also says, I accept you. You fit in. Come and be part of my family. There's more to say, and I'm sure that Alan and Pete will say more on this topic as we go forward. The importance of identity, how through identity it determines, the strength of who we are. It's important in terms of vision and direction. It's important in terms of the way that we relate to each other. But to leave you with this, and I've just said it, I'm just going to repeat it again, that our identity comes from who we are in Jesus. He's the one who shows us how much we're worth. He's the one who shows us what's important in life. He's the one who says, I accept you, warts and all. And it should be through that we learn to realize who we are. We are all individuals. We all have different values, strengths, abilities, etc. And that's fantastic. But we should never forget who we are because of whose we are. So let's just pray. Father, we just thank you that you have created us, each one individually, each one unique, and each one precious and valuable. That you call us your sons and daughters, but more than that, you call us princes and princesses. Father, your desire for us is that, and for everybody, is that no one should be lost, that everyone should recognize the value of who they are and should be welcomed into your family, because you have a place in heaven for each one of us, because we are so worthy, so precious, so valuable to you, Lord God. And Father, we just thank you for that. Father, we thank you, and I pray that each person in this room, each person listening to this, can grasp a sense of how precious we are to you, how valuable we are to you, and the fact that we don't need to be swayed by popular opinion. We don't need to worry what others may say about us. We don't need to worry about whether they like our Instagram posts or not. We don't need to worry about that. But we can be strong in our sense of values, strong in our sense of who we are, because it comes from you. Father, I just pray a blessing on each person as we go forward from this place, that out of that sense of knowing who I am, out of that sense of the way that I interact and express my values in my engagements with people, that we can do that more and more, and that we too can demonstrate to others where they may not have received unconditional love, where they may not have been accepted for who they were, warts and all, Lord God, that we can demonstrate that love that you've shown to us, to others, that we can help others to have a true sense of their value and their worth and recognition of who they are. And that through the way that we live, we can express your values, the values of heaven, the kingdom of heaven, to this world, Lord Jesus. In your mighty name, Lord God.